Hello and welcome to the Crystal Palace podcast. I'm Alfonso Greenborough, and in today's podcast I'll be looking over the game against Colchester United by bringing you my match review, player rankings and my man of the match. As well as this, I'm also going to bring you interviews with Roy Hodgson and Sam Woods after the game. So let's begin. Crystal Palace exited the Carabao Cup as League 2 side Colchester United progressed via a penalty shootout, winning 5-4. Victor Camarasa arrived at Palace in an exciting final few days of the transfer window for Palace fans. However, the Eagles had to wait for a glimpse of the on-loan midfielder in red and blue stripes, with that arriving on Tuesday night. On 3 minutes, Camarasa had the first chance of the game, with a rifled effort from 20 yards that Dean Gherkin saved well. The shot came off the back of intricate and patient build-up from Roy Hodgson's side, with Max Meyer in particular pulling the strings. The League 2 side weren't intimidated by the attacking lineup named by Hodgson, and the second proper chance of this Carabao Cup tie fell to the opposition on 9 minutes. Wayne Hennessy getting down well to his left as Ryan Clampin looked to arrow one across goal. Camarasa was showing plenty of agility in goal in between the Colchester midfield and defensive banks, a position that saw the midfielder cut through the back four with a perfectly weighted pass to Christian Benteke. And an on-Rustin Gherkin did well to thwart the Belgium international as he looked to have dinked the ball into the net. Benteke was again denied what looked to be a certain goal-scoring opportunity, this time the bar on goal line technology keeping the striker off the score sheet in the first half, despite Sellers Park erupting in premature jubilation. Half-time saw Gary Cahill come on for Martin Kelly, but it was another centre-back who was making an impression. Sam Woods, who was making his first senior start for the South Londoners, was being played at right-back on the night and making an impact. After some neat hold-up play from Benteke, Woods found himself teed up by the forward, and from 6 yards out, Gherkin threw an arm up and impressively stopped Woods from a dreamful debut. As Palace looked to make the sustained possession count, with just 30 minutes left, Wilfried Zaha entered proceedings, with Connor Wickham making way. However, the next dangerous attacking moment came from the League 2 side, with Ryan Jackson taking his time to line up a long-range effort that was blocked by Woods before dangerously bubbling out for a Colchester corner. Saturday's man of the match became Hodgson's third and final sub, with Jordan Ayew replacing Max Meyer in 73 minutes. And a Ghanaian was instantly involved, releasing Townsend down the right-hand side, with the winger's cross finding Benteke, who managed to get a shot on target. But a deflection took a sting out of the effort and Gherkin collected comfortably. The game drifted out in the closing 15 minutes, with both teams not wanting to exit the cup in late dramatic fashion. Therefore, the game went to penalties. Palace's designated penalty takers were Townsend saved, Ayew scored, Benteke scored, Camarasa scored and Zaha scored. Colchester United's chosen five were Norris, Noble, Brown, Calvin Hall and Shivers, with all United's players scoring from the spot, meaning that Palace exited the Carabao Cup in the second round. So I'm now going to move on to my player ratings, but before I start, don't forget you can follow us on both Twitter and Facebook at Crystal Palace for all the latest Palace news. So like I say every week, if you are someone like me who does like to follow a vast array of Palace accounts on both Twitter and Facebook, then of course do head over to the respective sites and follow our pages at Crystal Palace. Now alongside the latest sort of Palace news, that's sort of general news about the club, we obviously are quite up to date with transfers. Now we obviously are not in the transfer window now, obviously it's going to shut obviously at the beginning of the season, but also the international transfer window is going to shut in a few days time, so there isn't really going to be any news realistically about sort of solid links coming in and out, but certainly in the run up to January there's going to be lots of rumours, so obviously a good reason for you to follow us is so you can keep up to date with all the latest transfer news. And you've just got to look at what we've done over the summer. As soon as we found an article, as soon as we found a quote, anything that would give us an idea as to what sort of transfers might happen, we put it up on the account. So if you are someone who, obviously wants an account to follow for Palace news, but also so you can get sort of the latest transfer news, particularly in the run up to January, because I think depending on what happens in the next few months or so, if we find ourselves in a bad situation, it's going to be a busy January. But then likewise, even if we're in sort of a comfortable position in the league, we're still going to have to find another right back, because we've still only got one senior right back. We're going to have to find possibly other wingers to go in the side just to sort of bulk up the squad. So it's going to be, I think, regardless, it's going to be a busy transfer window in January. But whatever you guys think about it, obviously follow us so you can get all the latest news there. And obviously alongside that, we obviously post interviews and opinions as well. So of course, if you find an interview with management or with players, we'll obviously post that up on there. And of course, before the game, after press conferences, we'll give our reaction to that, we'll give our preview to that, and basically just general opinions or any questions that you guys send us, we obviously also reply to them on the account. So if you want a whole new Palace account to follow, particularly for the news and transfer aspect of it, of course follow our pages at Crystal Palace. Now, another great place for you guys to share your opinion is of course in the YouTube comments. So if you are listening to the podcast on YouTube, then do feel free to drop a comment below the video with your player ratings, where you rate the players' performances from 1 to 10. Now obviously, with this being such a bad performance, I don't expect many people to do that, just because it was so terrible. The majority of the team was so terrible, so realistically they're all going to have low ratings anyway. So maybe people don't want to do that. But even if you don't want to put your player ratings, comment below with your general views of the game, because I'm sure lots of people are going to have stuff to say about the game. Obviously most of it is going to be bad, but of course you've got to give credit to Colchester, because at the end of the day they obviously wanted it more than us. They basically wore us down, just stayed solid at the back, got it to 0-0 at the end, and obviously they had a chance at penalties, and obviously they took their chance. So their sort of tactic of wanting it more and just basically stopping everything we could do by just parking the bus to get it to a penalty shootout, then winning the penalty shootout, that tactic worked perfectly for them. And to be honest, you've got to put your hands up and go, they deserved it more than us. Their fans seemed up for it, the players seemed up for it, and just you see at the end the celebrations how much it means to them. If we had that sort of passion on the night, then maybe we could have got through. But in the end, Colchester played really nice and solid defensively. But if you've got any different views to that, whether you think it was more to do with just how terrible Palace was, obviously we weren't great, but I wouldn't say we were terrible, whereas others would say we're completely terrible. I would say that actually Colchester done a really good job of containing us, much like we did against United at the weekend. So whichever way you look at the game, obviously feel free to share your opinions there, as well as the player ratings. And it's basically so that I can read what you guys thought about the game, and obviously compare that opinion to my own. But also any other fans, whether they be Palace or Colchester fans, if they come to the channel, they can obviously read the comment section, listen to my views as well, so we can have sort of a discussion based on that. But like I said already, realistically they fully deserve to get it because of the way they approach the game, their tactics within the game, and just the pure fact that their attitude and just basically just wanting it more than us is why they went forth to win it, combined with the fact that we were just terrible on the night. Now of course, normally for cup games, and I say this every season, I don't really go into too much detail because people are not necessarily that interested in the cup in comparison to the league, hence why the podcast is shorter and a little more condensed. But also, people are more concentrated on the league, which I understand. Now obviously it would have been nice to have a little bit of a cup run, and I'm disappointed at that. But then I suppose because we've sort of had a hot and cold start to the season, we've had a few good bits here, but then a lot of terrible bits, particularly that Sheffield United game. So maybe the distraction of the cup is good, but losing to League 2 opposition, whether it's on penalties or not, is inexcusable. So whilst this is going to be a little bit more condensed, like I always do, it's going to be even shorter because I don't really want to talk about this result any more than I have to do. So I might as well move on now. But if you do want to follow any of the social media pages that I of course mentioned earlier, or join our Facebook group, then do check all the links that will be in the description below. But I'm now going to move on to the player ratings, starting to go with Wayne Hennessy, who I'm going to give a 4 overall. Honestly, this was sort of a player who was obviously going to come into the side, given his opportunity in goal, as he of course is a second choice. And obviously he hasn't had a chance this season. This was his chance to show, could you sort of come up against Gaeta? Could you actually compete with him for the first choice jersey in the goal? And to be honest, he didn't do that, hence why I've given him the 4. Yes, he made a few routine saves, but that's the least you would expect, the bare minimum you would expect from a keeper. But then arguably he was also rarely troubled in the 90 minutes, because all Colchester were doing, obviously they were sitting quite deep at the back, and when they did counter, their sort of tactic was to just get the ball off a Palace player and put it out for a corner and sort of try their luck at corners. So realistically, Hennessy didn't have much to do, but what he did do, he obviously made a few couple routine saves. And in terms of the penalty shootout, the fact that they scored all 4, he didn't get near any of them, is the thing that's really disappointing. Now I know he's only ever saved 1 penalty for Palace and the rest have gone in, but in a penalty shootout you at least want to try. I suppose he got the one also in pre-season, so make that 2 penalty saves for Palace. but still you would expect him to at least try and at least get the right direction, or at least try and get a fingertip to it, but he didn't get any near any of them. So overall, I do think the 4 for Hennessy is a fair result. And like I said at the beginning, you know, he's obviously, this was an opportunity for him to go out there and prove, could he battle with Gaeta for that number 1 spot. And this performance certainly cemented in my head, and most Palace fans' head, that Gaeta is, you know, upper class. He is way above Hennessy, so we won't be seeing much of him in the coming weeks. Obviously, moving on to the first defender, that is the right back Sam Woods. Going to give him a 5 overall. Didn't do much wrong, didn't do much great, so I think that's a fair reflection. Obviously, he was his first start for Palace, so he made his debut last season. Obviously, this was his first actual start for Palace. Done on a right job, considering he's a centre back who was playing at right back. Obviously, because Colchester was sitting quite defensive, he didn't have too much to do. But the thing I liked about his game, considering he's a centre-back, he tried to get forward as much as possible, linked up with Townsend quite well. And there was actually one moment in the game where, of course, once again, linking up with Andros Townsend, got the ball inside the box, and obviously had the shot from about 6 or 7 yards out. And it was a really great save from Dean Gherkin, the goalkeeper, sort of an instinctive save that, you know, he sort of just pulled it out the hat, done it out the blue, and made the save to get that opportunity. And to be honest, that really surprised me, because I'm like, you're normally a centre-back playing at right-back. I fully didn't expect him to go that far forward, and then I saw him make that run down the right, get the ball of Townsend, get inside the box, have the shot. It was almost going to go in, but of course that fantastic save from Gherkin stopped it going in. So that would have been a dream debut for him, would have made it 1-0, and we probably would have been able to see the game out. But arguably, you know, we didn't. Colchester stayed firm. And of course, as we already know, we went out on penalties. Now, obviously, the only negative, and I suppose the reason I've given him a 5 as opposed to maybe a 6, is just that he gave the ball away quite cheaply on a couple of occasions. But with him being young and with him playing out of position, basically, at right back, because even though he can play there, he is a centre-back first. So I suppose maybe that inexperience, or not necessarily being 100% comfortable in that position, is why he gave the ball away on a couple of occasions. But once again here, the youngster, Sam Woods, I do think the 5 is a fair result. So I'm now going to move on to the captain. Obviously, that is Scott Dann, who I'm going to give a 5 overall. Obviously dropped for the United game, and obviously Cahill came in and done a fantastic job. So it was right that Scott Dann got to play in the cup here. And to be honest, he was given the captain's armband, done alright in the side. Didn't really have too much to do because Colchester didn't really trouble us. And to be honest, for the most part, he was solid. But for the pure fact that we were just so slow at building up from the back and getting the ball so far forward. And it was mainly down to people like Dan and Kelly and Woods and Readable not passing the ball quick enough. He was so slow, which allowed Colchester to sort of reorganise. Because of that is why I've given him a 5 overall. Because whilst defensively he was okay, just that slow build-up play, and the fact that we just gave Colchester too much time to organise, and that made it hard, or even harder for us to break them down. That was something which, of course, was a little bit disappointing. So once again, a 5 for Scott Dann, I think, is a fair result. Obviously, moving on now to his centre-back partner, Martin Kelly. I'm also going to give him a 5. Now, when you consider Hodgson made 10 changes, obviously Kelly was the only one to stay in the side from the game against United, which, considering most of the players were knackered after the game, quite surprising. But he was, once again, you know, you've got to give Martin Kelly credit for the fact that he's played yet another game, and he's, you know, cementing that sort of backup centre-back spot for himself. But I think he obviously lined up against Scott Dann. They have an alright partnership, so I didn't really have any problem with that. And to be honest, the first 45 minutes, I think he was quite steady. But then, of course, at half-time, he got taken off for Gary Cahill. So I think maybe if we had Kelly in the second half, then maybe we might have... I'm not saying we would have scored, but maybe just having Kelly's ability on the ball to actually drive the ball forward maybe would have allowed us to break Colchester down by just driving forward down the middle. But because we lost him at half-time and he came, and obviously Gary Cahill came on, a little bit of a different player, obviously ultimately meant that we couldn't get anything from the game. And I don't really think Kelly staying on the pitch would have made much difference. And, you know, he was taken off as sort of a precautionary... on a precautionary basis in terms of the injury. So I do think, you know, the fact that he played the full 90 minutes at Old Trafford, played 45 minutes here, I think it was only right that he came off, because obviously you don't want a tired player maybe, you know, potentially leading to us conceding the goal, which ultimately we didn't, but maybe we could have. So I do think overall Martin Kelly here, I think the 5 is a fair result. Obviously, moving on to the final defender, that is, of course, Jara Readable, playing at left back here. I'm going to give him a 4 overall because I was not at all impressed. You know, people have been talking about maybe dropping PVA, or, you know, still playing stuff in midfield and just bringing in someone like Readable or even Joe Ward to play at left back, because before the United game how poor PVA was playing, and this was a game which sort of backed up my sort of opinion in the fact that there's no need to drop PVA. He can do an alright job there, because as we saw from Reed Ward, even though he played at left back, you know, before he joined Palace, yes, he was comfortable in possession, but that's because he normally plays in central midfield. But aside from that, he had real problems down that side, because the Colchester players were causing him all sorts of problems. And in terms of, he normally plays in midfield, so you'd expect him to have a little bit of a creative spark, maybe passing the ball forward. But with him playing at left back, we didn't really see that. You know, all he's sort of done was just run up and down that flank, pass the ball back if he couldn't, go anywhere, or just sort of hold up the ball while someone comes to him. So realistically, yes, he was alright and comfortable in possession, but the fact that he got overrun in terms of his defensive work, and in terms of just going forward, he just kept passing the ball back. I weren't impressed with him. That's why I've given him the 4 overall. And the people calling for PVA to start, or him to start above PVA, I think this performance sort of goes levels to show that actually PVA should remain in the side, because Readable just doesn't seem up to it at left back. Maybe if we give him a run and he gets his confidence back in midfield, maybe he can improve, but I don't really see that, and particularly off the back of this performance. So I'm now going to move on to the first player in the midfield. That is Victor Camarasa, who I'm going to give a 5. Obviously, another player making his debut. Obviously, Sam Woods made his first start for Palace, so his first full debut. And of course, Victor Camarasa, new Palace player, making his debut here. And to be honest, he started the game quite well, had an early strike from just outside the box, saved really well for the keeper. And, you've got to give credit to the keeper, because, Gherkin saved numerous shots that Palace had throughout the game. And they weren't just sort of your routine saves which Hennessy were making. These were fantastic saves, so you've got to give him credit on the end of the day. But I think Camarasa, he obviously looked Palace's biggest threat, started the game really well, had that creativity in the first half, but in the second half he seemed completely, dead. That influence sort of waded as the game went on. And maybe it was down to him not necessarily being 100% fit, or not quite embedded fully into the team, or whether it's just the fact that Colchester frustrated us so well and contained us so well in the midfield, which didn't allow Camarasa to express himself. Whatever it was a little bit disappointing, sort of his lack of influence he had, considering he started the game as one of our better players. And you've got to look at one chance in the first half, set up the ball for Christian Benteke, and obviously that chance went begging. So that chance in particular was a great example of what he can do, but the fact that he didn't do that and he didn't put in balls in behind for people like Benteke in the rest of the game, of course, was something that was disappointing. But we saw what he can do at Cardiff, and I'm sure a few more weeks he'll sort of just embedded into the side, and maybe a few games off the bench that will allow him to sort of get up to speed with his side, because I do think he'll be a great sort of asset to us in an attacking and a creative sense going forward. So once again here, Victor Camarasa, I do think the 5 is a fair result. So now I'm going to move on to obviously the second midfielder. That is of course James McCarthy. I'm going to give him a 4 overall. I was really disappointed with him, considering how well he's played in his sort of first few games for Palace. The fact that I've given him a 4 really just highlights how disappointing the performance was, because he played well against United. He actually showed passion against Sheffield United a few weeks ago. So he obviously looked to be one of our better players in the last 2 games, and then he comes up here against lower league opposition. Whether it's just the way they set up and the way they contained us, or whether it's just the fact that he had an off game, it was a really disappointing performance from him. And I suppose you've got to look at MacArthur. Obviously he didn't play in this game, but in terms of the way McCarthy played, it was much like MacArthur in terms of having that tenacity in midfield, covering a lot of ground, trying to make challenges, trying to get the ball forward. And yes, it was quite clear that he weren't afraid to make a challenge, but quite a few of his challenges were quite rash and they weren't necessarily that great, and we just sort of kept giving away niggly fouls. So the fact that he was trying to do good things but nothing really good came out of it was why I was disappointed with McCarthy's performance. And I suppose you've got to look at what he'd done when Gary Cahill came on. So he's literally been on the pitch a few minutes, and of course McCarthy plays him a really short pass, or a really, really poor pass, and obviously that led to the first booking of the night for Gary Cahill, because of course he had to try and sort of get back, try and make that challenge, and of course he conceded the yellow card there. So whilst he wasn't directly involved in that, in the actual challenge that Cahill made, the fact that he put him under pressure by giving him that poor pass was obviously a little bit disappointing to see. And going back to that point about the fouls, he conceded way too many needless fouls, and that's why I was disappointed with him, because against United, against Sheffield United, he done alright against both them teams. So the last 2 games he's played, but he's come into this game here, his first start for Palace, and whatever it was, whether it was an off game, whether it's Colchester doing well against him, it was really disappointing to see his performance, hence why I've given him the 4. So I'm now going to move on to the first of our attackers, and that is of course Andros Townsend, who I'm going to give a 3 overall. Obviously he was dropped for the United game, and there was lots of debate about that before that game, and of course it was right that he would come in to the game a few days later back into the starting 11, so he was restored there. And to be honest, I think down that right hand side he was fairly productive in terms of running up and down that right hand side, but when it came to that final ball, when it came to that cutting inside, that was the thing that was lacking about his game. So the reason I've given him a 3 is that yes, he was doing good work by being found and being available down that right hand side, but the fact that he done nothing with it, he was just running up and down there, weren't crossing the ball in or weren't doing it enough, weren't looking to cut inside. And I think the one time he cut inside and he actually got his shot away, it ballooned into the White Horse Lane end. So it just goes to show that the fact that he lacked that end product. Yes, he was doing good work running up and down, but he's a winger. We don't just want him to be running up and down. We want him to actually give that end product, and that was obviously really disappointing that was missing. And the fact that he combined that really poor performance with the fact that he took that penalty, a really poor penalty considering his one he scored against Tottenham last season was a fantastic, lots of power, perfect positioning, and nowhere the keeper was going to save it, whereas this was a really poor penalty, no power, no accuracy, easy for the goalkeeper to save. So realistically, the fact that he had a poor performance was really sort of combined with the fact that he also missed the penalty. So I do think overall the 3 is a fair result, and I suppose a performance like this, maybe Roy Hodgson saw something in training, hence why he didn't play him against United, because the last sort of few games or so that he's started, he hasn't really been up to his standard. So maybe him dropping out of the team for a few weeks and maybe just coming off the bench or whatever it needs to sort of give him that kick up the backside, basically, just to get him back to his old self. We really need to see it soon, because this was yet again another disappointing game in his season. So I'm now going to move on to obviously Max Meyer, who I'm going to give a 4. And to be honest, another player who I've given a 4 because he was really poor in the game. And I suppose it's much like McCarthy in the fact that he lined up obviously in the midfield as part of our midfield 4, but he really struggled to make an impact. And whether that's because he had a poor game, whether that's the fact that Colchester dealt with him well, I think it's a mixture of both, because we know that because he's got that creativity, he can pull something out of the bag, but we didn't get to see that in the game. He didn't see a lot of his passing ability, a lot of his dribbling ability. We didn't see that in the game, and of course it was all sort of epitomised in the fact that on 73 minutes he got taken off after what was a really sort of ineffective display. Now, in terms of the formation we played, obviously I talked about Andros, him being the first player in our front 3. We obviously sort of converted between players and sort of formations throughout the game, hence why I started talking about Townsend as part of the first player in our front 3, but actually he was also playing he was also playing in that front 3, but also playing wide on a 4-4-2 as well. So obviously I sort of confused you guys by starting talking about Townsend in the 4-3-3, whereas I'm now talking about Max Meyer. But anyway, so when we started the game with a 4-4-2, obviously Benteke and Wickham up top, and arguably we've seen that work under Pardew. So I thought, you know what, give it a go. 2 players who haven't scored in a while, so they both want to prove themselves, and obviously Max Meyer and Townsend playing out wide, being the providers. But the fact that Max Meyer didn't do that was obviously disappointing. And in that second half, when we reverted to a 4-3-3, obviously Wickham came off, Benteke was up top, Meyer was in behind with Zaha and Townsend on the wing. Even that formation change and allowing Meyer to not play down the left but play down the middle, even that formation change didn't seem to help, which was really disappointing, because we know how we can unlock teams by obviously dribbling down the middle. We didn't see that in the game, and of course that was really disappointing. So I'm now going to finally move on to the 2 strikers we had in the game. Obviously starting with Christian Benteke, going to give him a 5 overall, because I think he started the game and obviously he came off the bench at the weekend, didn't really do much against United, so yet again another game for him to sort of redeem himself and get back to his old self. And actually, in terms of breaking this duck in front of goal, he had a fantastic chance when played through by Camarasa. Obviously, he was denied by a really smart save by Dean Gerking. And of course, there was another chance slightly later on in the game where he's obviously tried to chip the ball. It's come off the crossbar. Goal line technology said it wasn't a goal because it wasn't a goal. And, that obviously went out and it was cleared. And it was literally so close. Literally, the whole stadium was there, about to cheer. And, you know, it was quite obvious that it wasn't a goal in terms of the goal line technology, and we could obviously see, but it was so close, you know, to actually breaking this duck. It would have been great for his confidence, but nothing really came off of that. And to be honest, other than them 2 chances, obviously the one which forced Dean Gherkin to make the good save, and of course the other one where obviously it came off the bar. Other than that, you know, there wasn't really much I saw from him in the game. And yes, he got into some good positions, unlike Wickham on the other side, but it was another frustrating day in front of goal for him, because he just couldn't get on the end of chances, because people like Meyer and Camarasa and Townsend weren't getting the ball into him. He obviously found it very difficult. And to be honest, whilst he got into some good positions, it wasn't helped by the fact that his teammates weren't supplying him, but also him being low on confidence obviously meant that, you know, like he had that chance that forced a save from Dean Gherkin. Maybe he could have done better there, even though it was a really good save. And of course the one where it came off the bar, yes, that's unlucky, but maybe if you chipped it slightly lower, it probably would have gone in or rebounded in off the back of the goalkeeper, whichever, you know, things could have happened. So overall, I do think the 5 I've given Benteke is a fair result. And of course our final striker, obviously Connor Wickham, going to give him a 3 because I really wasn't impressed with him. And whether it's the fact that because he's not really playing much in the team now, he's just been thrown in there up top with Benteke, or just like many of the other players, just because of how well Colchester just dealt with us, whatever it was, he got a rare chance to play up top, but failed to make it count, failed to sort of show Palace why he should be playing, failed to show Hodgson what he can offer to the side. And like I said already, when we were playing 4-4-2, we thought maybe Benteke and Wickham can play off each other, but they failed to gel like they used to. And to be honest, he'd be very disappointed with his showing, because he came off just after that an hour mark. I think it was an hour mark, sort of halfway through that second half or so. And to be honest, you know, I would have, unlike Benteke, who was at least trying to get into good positions, I didn't really see that from Wickham. We didn't really see that commitment to obviously come deep and carry the ball forward. And we didn't really see him trying to get into the box. And I know balls weren't going in the box in the first place, but it would have been just a bit nicer just to see him, or even commanding to someone, saying, come on, get the ball to me early, put the ball in the box. And because we didn't really see that movement, you didn't really see that sort of determination, that sort of commitment for him to obviously try and get into these forward positions, was something which of course was a little bit disappointing for me. So now I'm going to move briefly on to the 3 subs we made in the game. Obviously Cahill came on for Martin Kelly at half time. Going to give him a 6 overall, because I think he was composed at the back and just gave us that calm head which allowed us to see out the rest of the game and allowed us to obviously contain Colchester. But the fact that they also contained us at the other end, just, you know, we basically just sort of nullified each other out, which ultimately is why the game ended 0-0. I don't think Cahill put a foot wrong, hence why I've given him the 6 overall. Made a couple of vital challenges and interceptions, and whilst he was booked on that late challenge on Noble, that was obviously because of that poor pass from McCarthy I mentioned earlier. So a good performance from Cahill, and from what I've seen in the last sort of game and a half from him, he's obviously, until we get Sacco and Tompkins back, Cahill and probably Kelly playing alongside each other, that's going to be our centre-back partnership for the foreseeable future, because it seems to be working really well. Obviously Wilfried Zaha came on for Connor Wickham in the 62nd minute. Going to give him a 4 overall, because he obviously was brought on to bring us that pace, that energy, that creativity to the side, and basically inject some life into the game, because it was pretty dead at that point. And to be honest, not just the game was dead, but the whole Palace performance was quite flat. And Wilfried Zaha's normally that spark, but it didn't really happen for him. Whether it's the fact that because Colchester had numerous players on him, made it difficult for him, or just the fact that when he did try and do something creative, when he did try and put the balls into the box, because no one was there on the end of crosses or there to receive a pass, because no one was there, that is probably why he was a little bit disappointed. But, you know, he did get forward quite a lot up and down that left-hand side, but the fact that he was unable to produce that moment of magic was, like I've said, down to Colchester defending well, but also the fact that we didn't really have players around him which really could have complemented him or actually helped him through the game. So once again, a little bit of a disappointing performance, but I think it's, for me personally, it's 50-50 between him not necessarily doing that much, but also just the rest of the team performance didn't really help him get through the game. And of course, Jordan Ayew came on for Meyer, 73 minutes gone on the clock. Going to give him a 6 overall, because this was yet again another performance where Ayew's come on, he's shown the quality he's got, and for me, he's got to be our starting striker now, because it's yet another game where he played really well. Obviously, Roy Hodgson was sort of 70 minutes or so trying to look to get that breakthrough in the game. Brings on Ayew, obviously high on confidence from the United game. and he tried really hard. He tried everything he did on that time he was on the pitch, got stuck in, was trying to carry the ball forward, was going really deep to bring other players into play, and of course his positional play was really good as well as what the energy which he normally shows. So the fact that Jordan Ayew, in that small time he was on the pitch, showed sort of more energy, more drive, more determination than most of the players did in the whole game, really sort of goes to show how bad our performance was in the end. But overall, like I said at the beginning, I don't really want to dwell too much more on this result, but what I've got to say is congratulations to Colchester. They've obviously got Tottenham in the next round of the Cup, so I wish you all the luck there. If we get knocked out, I always support the underdog, particularly if we get knocked out by them, so, I hope they can go quite long in the competition. But ultimately, the reasons we lost this game is because we didn't show up on the day. Colchester wanted it more than us. They were able to contain us defensively by parking the bus, playing for that penalty shootout, and then when it came to the penalty shootout, obviously Hennessy got nowhere near it, which ultimately is the reason we went on to lose the game. But I just think, sort of, even though it is a second string team that we played, most of them players could start against any Premier League club. So when you've got that and you're losing to League 2 opposition, it's something that's really quite disappointing, because I'm sure, if we had just been a little bit more creative, if we'd shown a little bit more grit in the midfield, we would have been able to break them down. If we had our strikers actually having better positional play, we might have been able to actually get chances within the box. If we had our wingers and our wide midfielders actually crossing the balls into the box, we might have had chances off the back of that. So whilst you've got to give full credit to Colchester United for defending well deep and playing for that penalty shootout and winning it, you've got to give them credit, but also you've got to look at Palace and go, it was a really disappointing performance, obviously from individual players not showing up, but also just the general team's approach to the game, not playing too slow, too sluggishly, not getting the ball up into the box, which of course was something quite disappointing. So hopefully put that behind us, bring the first team players back in, your Lucas, your MacArthurs, and you basically, play the same side as we did against United against Aston Villa at the weekend. Put this result behind us, congratulate Colchester, put it behind us, and hopefully we can sort of come back with a better performance at the weekend, because if we play like we did on Tuesday night, we're for sure going to get beaten on Saturday. So this is obviously the part of the podcast where I'd normally go on to my Man of the Match award. Obviously I pick 4 players out, obviously briefly discuss them, and obviously give my overall Man of the Match to a player. But as you've heard in the player ratings, with it being such a disappointing and quite embarrassing performance as well, because realistically we should be doing a lot better against lower league opposition. No discredit to Colchester because they played well, but we arguably should be doing better, particularly with the team we put out there. So realistically I can't give any Man of the Match award to anyone, because the whole team performance was quite disappointing. So I suppose who I am going to give it to, I'm just going to give it to the whole Colchester team, because they do deserve the credit for the game. The way they defended against us, the way they sort of just basically frustrated us in the midfield was something that I was really impressed with. So this week's Man of the Match award doesn't actually go to a Palace player, but I'm just going to give it to the whole Colchester team as a whole. So congratulations Colchester, you don't get a trophy or certificate, but hopefully you do go quite far in the competition this season, because you do deserve it. You played well, much better than us on the night. You wanted it more than us. You showed that grit and determination that was lacking from the Palace team. So hopefully you can go far in the competition this season. So now you've heard my match report, player rankings and my Man of the Match. That concludes this week's podcast. Now I've got interviews with Roy Hodgson and Sam Woods following the game.
Sam, unfortunate defeat today. How disappointed is everyone after that?
Yeah, very disappointed. The change room was very quiet at the end. Gaff just said that it's not good enough, and it shouldn't have even got to penalties really. We should have done the job in the 90 minutes.
What do you think didn't work today?
I think in the first half we didn't move the ball quick enough, and then I think the second half was better, but just didn't create or take a chance when it came.
Yeah, talking of chances, that Christian one in the first half, did you think that was in?
Yeah, well, from where I was, it looked like it was in, but the ref didn't give it, so yeah, we just have to go again on Thursday and make sure we put it right on Saturday.
And your chance as well, that was pretty close.
Yeah, it was a good save from the keeper, to be fair. I mean, I don't really normally get into goal scoring positions that often, but maybe should have kept it low, but it was a good save from the keeper, to be fair.
Usually a centre-back, been asked to play right-back today. How was that experience?
Yeah, it was good. I play right-back in training sometimes, so it wasn't too too new for me, but this was my first time actually in a game, and yeah, I think I done an okay job, and yeah.
How different is it positionally for you?
I think you go forward a bit more, so like you've got to support Andros, who's great in front of me, talking to me, helping me out, and yeah, there's more attacking play that you've got to contribute with instead of just defending.
And how great was it for you? Obviously, as a Palace fan, we spoke to you when you made your debut last year when you came on, but to start a game at Selhurst Park.
Yeah, no, it was a great feeling walking out the tunnel and Glad All Over singing. Yeah, just really a bit disappointed now though with the result, but no, yeah, it was a really goosebumps feeling to begin with.
A bit of a come down after the heroics of Saturday.
Yes, that's very true. I believe that the team we put out tonight would have been capable of winning the game. It was important for some players to get a chance to show what they can do. We had injuries to Ward and Schlupp anyway, and of course there are one or two other players coming back from injury like Schlupp that we didn't really want to take a chance on. But having said all of that, I still think that the starting lineup today was a starting lineup which in my opinion was going to be capable of winning us the game, but they didn't, and they didn't because we didn't play well enough, and Colchester played very well.
Was it frustrating, Ryan, that some of the players that did bring into the team didn't take the chance?
Well, that's what being a professional football is all about. You know, we sign players and we believe in them, and we believe that when they get their chance they're going to shine, but you can't do more than give the player the chance to get in the team and play, and there will be quite a few players this evening I'm sure who won't be very happy with their performances. But the bottom line for us is at the moment that until we can start scoring some goals, it's always going to be very difficult for us. You know, we've had a 0-0, we've had a 0-1, we've had a 2-1, and now we've had another 0-0. And that's because we don't, in my opinion, either create or take our goal scoring chances at the moment. And as a result, you're never sheltered from the fact that things cannot go your way. In a cup competition, you can lose on penalties, or in a game where it's 0-0, you can always be the recipient of a penalty or a stray shot which beats you, despite the fact that your defending has been good throughout. So nothing has changed in that respect. But tonight it was a chance for Connor Wickham and Christian Benteke to show what they could do after Jordan's fine performance at the weekend. But we brought Jordan and we were following an attempt to make things a little bit better. I thought the second half performance was actually better than the first half performance, and I think we were quite close on one or two occasions too, winning the game. But having said that, I think that Colchester deserved their victory. I thought they played extremely well, and we weren't good enough to beat them.
Okay.
If I could hear, I think.
It's for the audio.
Well, for the
Go
audio.
ahead, Jack.
Roy, I know we've spoken about home form before, it's a bit different from the league game, but do you feel sometimes the players feel a bit uncomfortable when they have to sort of dominate the ball?
We'll see. I mean, I think it's early to start making those judgments. We'll wait and see. We'll see how much of the ball we have against Aston Villa. We'll see how much of the ball we have against Wolves and these teams, and we'll see then if it's true that when we have a lot of the ball, we aren't creating enough chances against packed defences. But it isn't easy to create chances against packed defences, and what wins you games against packed defences is the individual ability of certain players, their ability to create and score a goal chance, which isn't the obvious one, free with the goalkeeper with no one within 20 yards of you, or some sort of extra quality, technical quality in the 18-yard box, which the defenders, however well organised they are, however well concentrated they are in that area, can't deal with because the quality is so good. We see it all the time with the top teams. We see Man City every week producing these wonderful efforts. And if you say to me, well, why can't you do that? I think the answer is pretty obvious. We aren't, at the moment, blessed with that firepower. And we would just have to keep working as we can, as best we can, to get whatever results we can.
Do you
We'll see. I mean, he's technically gifted, so we'll see.
Okay, great.
Martin Kelly half time, was that?
No. No, once again in that situation as well. Don't forget we've got Tompkins and Sacco long-term injured, so that's two of our very important centre-backs last year who still haven't made any sort of appearance as yet. So that leaves us the three centre-backs that we have. I chose on Saturday to play with Gary Cahill and Martin Kelly, and I was more than happy with their performance. So I wanted to make certain, if I could, that those two would also be fit and available for this Saturday's game. The same applied really to one or two other players who possibly could have played, but I wanted to make certain they were going to be fit and ready for Saturday. And when it comes to the fullbacks, I felt sorry for both Sam Woods and Jaido Riedewald having to play right back and left back. Sam Woods is an under-23 centre-back, an out-and-out centre-back, that had to play right back in a fairly attacking formation second half when we had a lot of the ball. And Jaido Riedewald is a central midfield player who had to play left back because neither Patrick Van Arnholt or Joel Wood were available to him.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Thank you.
Well, you got one
I'm
question?
sorry, one more hand. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, looking at your programme notes, Roy, you said that the Premier League is your priority. I mean, what do you take from this match going into the Premier League match next weekend?
Not much. I mean, the fact is, I can't think of anything positive to say. If you mean by your question, you know, what positives can I take? I can't take any. There'll be a lot of very disappointed players at training on Thursday because they'll feel that the opportunity was there and they weren't able to take it. There is no way you can feel in any way other than extremely dissatisfied, extremely disappointed is the word everyone uses. I don't know what disappointment is really. We went into this game with a fresh group of players, resting a lot of the players who put in such a great effort at Old Trafford, expecting to go out and, you know, beat an opponent which is 3 divisions below you. But in the end of the day, I thought the 0-0 at the end of the game was more than justified from their point of view. And then you go to the lottery of the penalties, which team takes. You know, we only took one poor one and 4 good ones, but they took 5 good ones. So that means we're out and they go forward. And next time the EFL Cup is being played, we will get one of those very sad reminders that when you're watching the team that Colchester play, you'll be thinking that really should have been us because we were given a golden opportunity to advance. We didn't take it.
So there you have it. Now you've heard what Roy Hodgson and Sam Woods had to say after the game. That concludes this week's podcast for the game against Colchester United. But make sure to come back next week for a post-match review of the game against Aston Villa. So thanks for listening and remember to up the Palace.